Shopify is a global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business and sell more with less effort thanks to the Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/redcircle, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/redcircle now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/redcircle.
Eucatastrophe. Only J.R.R. Tolkien could invent a word that sounds like a spell from Gandalf, right? But it's actually one of the most important ideas behind his stories, an unexpected moment of joy that changes everything. Tolkien, a devout Christian, saw Eucatastrophe most fully realized in the story of Christ's resurrection. Easter is this weekend, a time when millions around the world reflect on themes of renewal and hope. And whether you observe Easter or not, the concept of hope breaking through despair is something we can all connect with. Today we'll explore Tolkien's thoughts on Eucatastrophe from his essay On Fairy Stories, and how it shapes the heart of his tales from The Lord of the Rings to the Silmarillion. I'm Aaron, your host and guide to Wandering Middle-earth, especially for first-time readers of Tolkien's works. Visit ringspodcast.com to find my free downloadable guides for reading the Silmarillion and other works by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, let's wander. Eucatastrophe. It's a mouthful. Sounds like a magical mishap Gandalf might shout when his staff misfires. But the word is pure Tolkien, literally. He invented it. Tolkien coined Eucatastrophe in his 1939 lecture On Fairy Stories, later published in a revised essay. It's a blend of Greek, eu meaning good, and catastrophe meaning sudden turn or downturn in a story. Together, good catastrophe, a surprising turn of events that doesn't bring doom, but joy. He explains, quote, "The eucatastrophic tale is the true form of fairy tale, and its highest function. This sudden joyous turn, as Tolkien called it, is a moment when everything seems lost, until grace intervenes. It doesn't deny the presence of sorrow or evil. In fact, eucatastrophe only works because of the darkness that comes before it. Quote, it does not deny the existence of discatastrophe, of sorrow and failure. The possibility of these is necessary to the joy of deliverance." Think about that. For Tolkien, fairy stories aren't just fluffy escapes. They acknowledge the full weight of fear, despair, and suffering, but they refuse to leave us there. They offer hope, not as a guarantee, but as a possibility. And when that hope breaks through the darkest moment, it hits with a kind of emotional force few other narrative moments can match. Tolkien describes it this way, quote, "It is a sudden and miraculous grace, never to be counted on to recur. It does not deny the existence of sorrow and failure. The possibility of these is necessary to the joy of deliverance. It denies universal final defeat." The idea is core to Tolkien's storytelling. It's not just an ending device. It's baked into the structure of his stories and more deeply into his worldview. For Tolkien, Eucatastrophe wasn't just a literary trick. It was a reflection of something true about the world. Quote, "The Gospels, in the Bible, contain a fairy story, or a story of a larger kind which embraces all the essence of fairy stories. But this story has entered history. The birth of Christ is the eucatastrophe of man's history. The resurrection is the eucatastrophe of the story of the incarnation." That's a bold claim. Tolkien didn't see fairy stories as lesser or childish. He saw them as a unique way to tell truth. And in the Gospels, he saw the, quote, "myth that really happened." He continues, quote, "It has preeminently the inner consistency of reality. There is no tale ever told that men would rather find was true, but this story is supreme, and it is true." When Tolkien wrote stories about Middle-earth, he wasn't crafting allegories. In fact, he resisted allegory fiercely. But he was writing with a lens shaped by faith. Eucatastrophe became the heartbeat of his storytelling, because it was the heartbeat of his theology. Even if you're not approaching Tolkien's work through a spiritual lens, there's something universally resonant here. We all know what it's like to feel like we've hit the bottom, to lose all hope. We all long for the moment, however small, when something shifts, when the light breaks through. Tolkien described it not just as a happy ending, but as something deeply moving, almost involuntary. Quote, "It is the mark of a good fairy story that however wild its events, however fantastic or terrible the adventures, when the turn comes, a catch of the breath, a beat and lifting of the heart, near to, or indeed accompanied by, tears, as keen as that given by any form of literary art, and having a peculiar quality." That phrase, a catch of the breath, a beat and lifting of the heart, is so beautiful. You can feel that moment, right? You've probably had it while reading a story, or maybe in real life. It's the moment when the impossible becomes real, not through power or control, but through grace. Tolkien also emphasized that eucatastrophe doesn't come from nowhere. The characters must endure loss, fear, suffering. They must be pushed to the brink. In fact, if they are not pushed to the very extreme, the eucatastrophe doesn't land with emotional truth. It's not a Deus ex machina because it's not just about plot, it's about tone and timing. The key is that it's unexpected, yet somehow fitting. It's not cheap, it's not easy, it's true. And that's what makes Tolkien's work so enduring. Not just the epic battles or the sweeping landscapes, it's the feeling that even in the worst darkness, there is still hope. That joy is possible, that a new morning can break. As you explore Tolkien's stories, from The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings to the Silmarillion and more, you will start to see eucatastrophe everywhere. It's in the unexpected victory. It's in the arrival of help at the last moment. It's in the small, quiet choices of mercy that shape the fate of the world. And at the end of this episode, we'll come back to where Tolkien saw it fully realized, the resurrection of Christ. But first, let's look at how eucatastrophe plays out in the stories of Middle-earth, and the most epic, tear-jerking, heart-lifting moments of Tolkien's Legendarium. And if you have a friend who could use a little lifting and some hope today, please share a link to this episode with them. Tolkien didn't just theorize about eucatastrophe, he embodied it in his stories. Once you understand the concept, you start to see it everywhere. These moments are often surprising, often come after deep loss, and always carry that emotional surge, a beat and lifting of the heart. They're not just good endings. It's grace breaking in when all hope seems lost. Let's look at a few examples from The Silmarillion, The Hobbit, and The Lord of the Rings. If The Lord of the Rings is epic, then The Silmarillion is mythic. The Silmarillion is actually my favorite book. It's heavy with tragedy and heroism. But even here, Tolkien seeds eucatastrophe, sparks of hope glowing through long ages of shadow. A eucatastrophic moment comes at the end of the First Age, Eärendil's voyage. With the Silmaril in hand, Eärendil sails into the Undying Lands, pleading for mercy on behalf of elves and men. The Valar respond, and the War of Wrath begins. Morgoth is overthrown. Tolkien describes, quote, "Then the sun rose, and the light of it was like a flame of gold, and the armies of the Valar came out of the west." Eucatastrophe here comes through intervention, divine grace in response to one man's courage and sacrifice. But the really unique thing about this particular story is that only Eärendil could have made that voyage. He alone had the mixed blood of both elves and men, and had the only right to go back and sail to the west and plead for the help of the Valar. At first glance, The Hobbit might feel lighter, more of a children's tale, because that's how it started. But Tolkien never writes simple stories. The seeds of eucatastrophe are there, growing steadily. The most famous moment comes near the end of the Battle of the Five Armies. The armies are clashing, and it looks like all is lost. Then, Tolkien delivers one of his favorite devices, the unexpected arrival of eagles. Quote, "The eagles are coming! The eagles are coming!" It might sound like a convenient save, but it's not just about plot. The eagle's arrival speaks to that deeper theme. Help can come from beyond when you least expect it. Not something earned or manipulated, grace descending from the sky. And yet this eucatastrophe doesn't erase all sorrow. Thorin dies, Fili and Kili fall. Bilbo survives, but the cost is real. That's what makes the joy authentic. It's joy through sorrow, not in place of it. And in a quieter moment when Bilbo wakes up after the battle, Tolkien writes, quote, "Victory after all, I suppose," he said, feeling his aching head. "Well, it seems a very gloomy business." That line captures Tolkien's depth, how joy and grief are always mingled. If Eucatastrophe is the sudden joyous turn, The Lord of the Rings is practically a masterclass in how to build to that moment. Perhaps the most iconic is the destruction of the One Ring at Mount Doom. Frodo has carried the ring across hundreds of miles, reaches the very end of his journey, and fails. He claims the ring for himself. But in a eucatastrophic twist, Gollum bites off Frodo's finger, and rejoicing, falls into the fire. Quote, but Gollum, dancing like a mad thing, held aloft the ring, a finger still thrust within its circle, and then with a shriek, he fell. Frodo could not finish the quest. Evil wasn't overcome by willpower. But salvation still came, through an unexpected turn, through Gollum, who had been spared earlier by Frodo and Sam. It's grace, it's justice, it's tragedy and triumph in a single breath. That is Eucatastrophe. Another brilliant example is the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. As the forces of Mordor overwhelm Minas Tirith, all seems lost, and then the horns of Rohan sound on the wind. The riders charge. This moment in and of itself is eucatastrophic. It's one of the reasons why so many people say that this is their favorite scene in the films. It evokes that beat of the heart, that lifting of the heart. But even in the midst of their charge, they falter. The servants of the enemy are just too many. And worse, black ships filled with more enemy troops have just arrived. Éomer laughs in despair. Quote, and lo, even as he laughed at despair, he looked out again on the black ships, and he lifted up his sword to defy them. And then wonder took him, and a great joy. And he cast his sword up in the sunlight, and sang as he caught it. And all eyes followed his gaze. And behold, upon the foremost ship a great standard broke. There flowered a white tree, and that was for Gondor. But 7 stars were about it, and a high crown above it. Wow, even just reading that passage, I'm getting that beat of the heart, that lifting of the heart. Even in Éomer's darkest and most despairing moment, when he seems in the midst of his last stand, his despair suddenly turns to joy. As no servant of Mordor fills those ships, but rather Aragorn. That moment of turning from despair to wonder is pure Tolkien. It's not just about a battle won, it's about the feeling that something good, something impossible has broken through. One last example from perhaps my most favorite passage of The Lord of the Rings. A very small eucatastrophic moment. The star in Mordor seen by Sam. Quote, there, peeping among the cloud rack, was a white star, twinkling in the west. The beauty of it smote his heart. The shadow was only a small and passing thing. There was light and high beauty forever beyond its reach. That's eucatastrophe in its quietest form. Not plot-driven, not about survival or rescue, but a moment of beauty and clarity. A reminder that evil doesn't have the final say. In all of these stories, the Silmarillion, the Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings, Tolkien shows us that joy is possible even in the darkest hour. Not because the characters always win, not because they're perfect, but because, at the end of their strength, grace steps in. And Tolkien doesn't resolve these stories with happily ever after. There's always a cost. Frodo can't remain in the Shire. Thorin pays for his greed with his life. But in every case, the story bends toward a joy that is real because of the sorrow that came before. It's that mixture, tears and triumph, that defines eucatastrophe. And in the final segment, we'll look at where Tolkien believed this idea found its ultimate expression, not in fiction, but in history, in the story of the resurrection.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Lord Vader, Operation Andor is underway.
Excellent. If we release 3 episodes per week, the Lorehounds will never be able to cover every episode. The Imperial forces will crush the rebellion before it begins.
Stand by. We're picking up something on our scanners.
Echo Squadron, reporting in.
Delta Squadron, on your left.
Tango Squadron, on your 6.
With Imperial forces coming in fast, we're calling all rebels to join the fight this season. Starting after the April 22nd premiere, you'll hear 3 full breakdowns for each week's episodes of Andor Season 2. Each podcast will be led by one of our squadron leaders, Alicia, David, and John. We'll be bringing in new and familiar voices to fill out the roster. Search for the Lorehounds on any podcast platform to join us in a galaxy far, far away. And don't forget to check out our season pass for even more content like our Holocron bonus pods. It's good news for anyone, except Darth Vader.
All through Tolkien's stories, we've seen how Eucatastrophe works, a sudden, unexpected joy breaking through the shadows. But for Tolkien, these weren't just beautiful moments in made-up worlds. They were echoes of something far deeper, far truer. He believed in a real Eucatastrophe, a joy not born in imagination but in history. Tolkien writes near the end of On Fairy Stories, quote, "The birth of Christ is the Eucatastrophe of man's history. The resurrection is the Eucatastrophe of the story of the Incarnation. This story begins and ends in joy. It has preeminently the inner consistency of reality." That line, inner consistency of reality, is striking. Tolkien isn't just saying the resurrection is a powerful metaphor. He's saying it actually happened, and it fulfills the deepest longings we feel when we read fairy stories. Those longings for deliverance, for restoration, for a joy that overcomes sorrow, aren't silly. They're signals, shadows of a greater story echoing through the smaller ones. Tolkien was a storyteller, yes, but he was also a Christian. And he believed the resurrection was the moment where the greatest possible Eucatastrophe took place, when death was defeated, when despair gave way to hope, when what seemed like the bitterest ending became the truest beginning. And the pattern fits. The story of Christ is full of sorrow, suffering, betrayal, and death. It doesn't shy away from the weight of evil, but that's exactly why the joy of Easter morning hits so hard. Tolkien says, quote, "There is no tale ever told that men would rather find was true, but this story is supreme, and it is true. Art has been verified." In the Silmarillion, Eärendil makes a journey that none have survived before. In The Hobbit, Bilbo wakes up surrounded by grief. In The Lord of the Rings, Frodo and Sam walk through Mordor thinking there's no hope left. And then something changes. A glimpse of light, a turn, a grace beyond expectation. That is the resurrection. And whether or not you share Tolkien's faith, this point remains. The greatest stories resonate because they reflect this deep truth, that joy can pierce the heart of sorrow, and that even the finality of death is not the end. In Christian belief, the resurrection isn't just a happy ending. It's the beginning of all things made new. That death and darkness don't get the last word. That light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This is why Tolkien stories endure, not only because they're well written or cleverly plotted, but because they echo the deep magic of the resurrection, a magic that's not fantasy, but reality. As Sam says, waking up on the field of Cormallen, quote, "Is everything sad going to come untrue?" And Gandalf responds, quote, "A great shadow has departed," said Gandalf, and then he laughed, and the sound was like music, or like water in a parched land, and as he listened, the thought came to Sam that he had not heard laughter, the pure sound of merriment, for days upon days without count. It fell upon his ears like the echo of all the joys he had ever known, but he himself burst into tears. Then, as a sweet rain will pass down a wind of spring, and the sun will shine out the clearer, his tears ceased, and his laughter welled up, and laughing, he sprang from his bed. Sam's question, is everything sad going to come untrue? It's one of the most profound theological statements in modern literature. And Tolkien, in his quiet way, says yes. Because of the resurrection of Christ, yes. Everything that is sad becomes untrue. So this Easter season, or wherever you are on your own journey, maybe take a moment to sit with that idea that the deep sorrows of life, loss, fear, death, aren't the end of the story, that there is a greater turn coming, a joy as real as any sorrow, a eucatastrophe of cosmic and also personal proportions. And as Tolkien believed, that story has already begun. If Tolkien's vision of eucatastrophe stirred something in you today, if that idea of a joy beyond sorrow, of everything sad coming untrue, feels like more than just a story, I invite you to sit with that. Read the essay on fairy stories, revisit Sam's awakening on the field of Cormelin, or pick up one of the gospel accounts and read the resurrection story with Tolkien's lens in mind. I've put a link in the show notes to one of my favorite resurrection passages. Let yourself wonder, what if this joy is true? Let that unexpected joy shape your days. Share it, speak it. Let it remind you that even in the darkest hour, the light is never far. Because as Tolkien reminds us, quote, this story, and I might add, your story, begins and ends in joy. Thank you to this episode's executive producer, The Old One. If you would like to support the Lore of the Rings podcast, visit ringspodcast.com/member. If you found today's wandering of Middle-earth to be inspiring, please share this episode with a friend. Lastly, if you would like to connect with me, I am most active on Threads. Find a link to my profile at ringspodcast.com and tap the @ symbol near the top. And thank you for wandering Middle-earth with me today.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.